Today we are going to be taking a look at Angular Dapp for Moralis, a basic setup and how to log in and auth for the users. So you can see that I have just created a basic Angular project here, and in this side we have an index.js file. This is going to be our Express backend, and for that Angular should be at least of version 14. So make sure you're on Angular 14. So first we're going to be setting up our backend. So we are going to be needing Moralis, and we're going to be needing Express. We're going to be requiring Express and CRS for cross origin resource sharing, and then we are going to be needing cookie parser to parse the cookies, and we also going to be needing JavaScript web tokens, so that once a user is logged in, we create a token for the user, and later we are going to be verifying after the user has signed the message. We're going to be creating a config file where we're going to be setting up our messages and all the other information that we are going to be displaying once the user clicks login, and that's going to be displayed in the Metamask. And also we're going to be setting our app as Express and for the port as 3000. And after that we're going to be just saying app.use express.json, because we are going to be sending mostly JSON data from our frontend to backend, and then we are making sure that the app uses cookie parser. After that I'm going to be letting my server know that I'm going to be requesting from the Angular, so we're going to be setting course for this Angular. So you can see that we have set the origin as process.env.angular. I'm going to be setting this up soon. Before that, we need to be creating a config file. So this is going to be the message that we're going to be displaying on our MetaMask. So now we are going to be setting up our .env file. I've just created a file as .env, and in .env the first thing we are going to be creating is our app domain. This you can specify anything. This is going to be displayed on the MetaMask once the user clicks login button to make the user sign the message. So after that we are going to be needing a Moralis API key here. Make sure you keep this confidential, guys. And then we are going to be using Angular URL so that the server lets us make requests from our front end. And other than that, we're going to be needing our auth secret. You can give this anything. So that's it for .env file. And as for us, our front end, we are going to be first installing our Axios, because we are going to be making a request. So I'm just going to type npm install Axios, and after that we are going to be just creating our component named balances. After creating our balance component, I'm just going to be providing it in our app routing model, and after that we're going to be heading into our balance.html, and we're going to be creating some HTML. And now I'm just going to create these variables just so that it doesn't throw any errors. So after our balance component, I just created another two components named as sign in and user. So we are going to be providing those in our routes path. So after doing this, before we do anything else, I suggest you guys take a look at Wagmi and JWT, because after the Web3 wallet authentication is done, the server that we have created is going to create a session cookie with a signed JWT stored inside. It contains the session information of our users, such as address, the signed message, and everything else that are needed. And as of for WalkMe, we are going to be as we are going to be using a Web3 wallet connection using Metamask. So we are going to be using this WAGMI slash core JavaScript library. It helps us with getting our ENS name and balance information and much more. It is very simple. Just take a look at it. So now in our Angular app, we're just going to be installing all the dependencies we need. So I'm just going to type npm install wagmi slash core and ethos and axios. While this is getting installed, we are going to go into our environment.ts file and create a server URL. You can see that the server URL here and here is similar. This is because when we make request to our server, it's going to let us get the information. That is why we have defined the course. So after installing the dependencies, we're just going to be going to our sign-in component.html, and we are going to be adding our login button. So for this, I'm just going to create my handle auth function. After the sign-in component, we're just going to go into our user component, and we are going to create a variable known as session and a function to handle our sign out functions. And in the HTML, I'm just going to create a div with an ngIf condition. So what is happening here is, if the session is created, we are going to be displaying the session. So we are going to be setting up that later. Once we have done setup with our server, we are going to be updating this later on. So after creating that, I'm just going to take this out and we're going to run our project. You can see that when we are in sign in, it's working, and for user it's working. So that's all that is going to be in our front end. So let's get back to our ExpressJS. Here you can see that we are importing many things. So I'm just going to install this. You can see that I'm installing cookie parser, JSON web tokens, and .env. So once the installation is done, in our index.js file, we are going to be creating a request message endpoint for making request to the Moralis auth to generate a unique message. So for this, in Angular, we are going to be using the endpoint sign-in page. So I'm just going to create a request message endpoint. So you can see that I've just said app.post, and I'm just giving it a path as request message, and I'm just creating an async function, and I'm just going to, so what I'm doing here is in our front end, we are going to be sending in a we are going to be sending a post. So basically what this endpoint is doing is, we're going to be sending data from our sign-in page to this endpoint, and in that data we're going to be having our wallet address, the chain that we are connected to, and the network that we are on. So after getting that, I'm just going to be creating these variables and assigning those variables, and I'm going to be passing these address, chain, and network to the Moralis auth, so that it signs the message and sends us back the result. So once you're in Moralis, you can take a look at the authentication API. So this is the same thing that I'm following. You can see that the request message takes in the address, the chain, and the network. That is all the required. So that is what I'm going to be providing in our slash request message. So after that, we are going to be creating our verify endpoint. So for better understanding, you can take a look at this uh, in the auth API in the Moralis docs. Go head over to the overview, and you can see that here, once we make request from our wallet, the request is sent to the Moralis and it generates a message and sends us back. So we are just getting this back in our user request user, and then we are going to be verifying this. So that is why I'm going to be creating our verify endpoint, where we are going to be getting in our message and signature from our request endpoint, and then I'm just going to be sending it to the uh, Moralis verify endpoint, and I'm going to be sending the message and signature, and it verifies the message and signature that is sent by the user. After that, I'm just going to be creating a user variable which contains the address, profile ID, and the signature of the user. After that, I'm just going to be creating a token. This is where the JavaScript web token comes into the play. So I'm just going to be giving the user as a parameter to the jwt.signin method, and I'm just also going to be giving the process env.authSecret, where the auth secret is this. This can be, you can generate a difficult auth secret. For the demonstration purpose, I've just given this. So after creating our JWT, I'm going to be setting that JWT inside our cookies, and if everything works fine, return the user. So this is what all this endpoint is going to be doing. But in our front end, we are just going to be getting the message, the signature, and the user ID later on. And we are also going to be adding our catch so that we can trace our errors if there are any. So in our next endpoint, we are going to be verifying this JWT. And if the JWT is not sent by the user, we are not going to be allowing the user to proceed further. So for that, I'm just going to be creating another endpoint known as authenticate. So in here, I'm just going to get this token, and I'm just going to give it an if condition saying that if the token is not sent, send it an error as 403. And in our try block, we are going to be sending that JWT to, to be verified from Moralis. So we are going to be passing in the token as a parameter and our auth secret, and we're just going to be catching the errors. And the last endpoint that we're going to be needing is to log out a user. This is going to be very straightforward. We're just going to be creating our endpoint as a logout, and we're just going to say res.clear cookies, and the cookie that we have just created here, we are going to be clearing that, and the send status as 200, and catch the errors if there are any. So after creating the logout endpoint, that is will be the last endpoint that we are going to be creating in our service. So after that, we are going to be now setting up our front end. So the first thing we need to do is get into our signin.ts file, and we are going to be importing some files like the router to make the routes, and we're going to be using Axios to make the HTTP request. You can also use the Angular's HTTP request, and we are going to be getting the default providers from ethers, and a lot of imports from Wagmi core. So we are going to be creating a client. For example, once the user gets connected, we are going to be creating a client for that user, which contains the wallet address, the ENS name, and all the other informations like the wallet address is connected and everything. So importing this is going to be necessary. After that, we're going to be importing our environment file. So now after creating all these imports, the first thing we are going to be doing is creating a Wagmi client. So I'm just going to say client is equals to create client, and I'm going to set the auto connect as true, and the provider is going to be our get default provider. That is why we are importing this here. If you don't understand any of this, just head over to the Wagmi and just take a look at the documentation. Here you can see the same thing is been followed. So I'm just following the documentation. So after creating the client, we are going to be declaring our handle auth function. The first thing we need to check is if the account is already connected, that is the Metamask is already connected, and if it is connected, we're going to disconnect it, and for that we're going to be using is connected variable. From this is everything from the Wagmi, and after that we are going to be needing a provider. So once we set up the provider saying await connect and connector as new injected connector, we are going to be getting all the information for the connected wallet, for example the address, the chain, and the network. So these are the main three things we're going to be needing to make request to our Moralis endpoint. So that is why I'm going to be creating this user data, and after that I'm just going to create a variable known as data, and I'm just going to use this endpoint from our server as request message. You can see that. So I'm just going to say await access.post, and here I'm going to be providing our server URL so that the server allows the request from the front end. That is why we have created this URL and also mentioned the port in our C course. So after that, I'm just going to be giving the endpoint as request message, the same thing here, and we are going to be giving this user data. That is where we have created a post request to this endpoint. So we are going to be sending information of the wallet as user data as a JSON. That is why here we are using Express app as a JSON file. So what happens is when I send this data user data, the user data contains the address chain. So that is the same thing that I have declared here, address, chain, and network. This information is coming from this endpoint as user data, and after getting this, I'm just going to be passing this data to the Moralis auth to make the request message. So after that, I'm just going to be waiting for this message here. So I'm just going to say data dot message so that we get back the result that is sent by the Moralis after the request message endpoint is cleared. And after that, we are going to be getting a signature here from our verify endpoint. And after that, I'm just going to say we're going to be saying the after everything this is done, we are going to be redirecting our user to the users page. You can see that in the verify endpoint I'm sending the message and signature here. That is the same message and signature that we have got here, and we are sending that to the Moralis auth.verify, where it verifies the message that has been sent here and here. If it's not equal, it's going to throw an error. So after our sign-in component is done, we're going to be going into our user component, and you can see in the server we have created an endpoint known as Authenticate. This is where we are going to be authenticating the that the user has sent the JWT or not. So in our front end, I'm just going to be creating an endpoint for this. So I'm just going to say go to this endpoint with credentials as true, and I'm going to be getting the data from the uh, verify endpoint from Moralis. So it gives us a lot of data. Some of the data is very not useful to us. So what I'm going to be doing is saying we don't need IAT values. Just give me the auth data. So after that, I'm going to create a session for this auth data, and I'm just formatting this to look nice in our front end. After that, I'm going to be routing our users to the sign in page. So what happens here in the server is, I've already explained this. So once the user sends the token here, we have created a token. We're going to be getting that token back from the cookies. And if the token is not sent, we're going to be sending the 403 error. And if the token was sent, we're going to be sending it to the verify endpoint and verify if the sent token is the same. If it was same, then we are going to be coming here and we're going to be sending the user to the sign in page. So all there is left is to create our sign out function. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to say axios.get, and we're going to be providing a server URL, and we're going to be sending it to the slash logout endpoint here. So this is going to clear our cookies, and after clearing these cookies, we want the web page to be redirected to sign in page so that the user can sign in again. So this was it. So after doing this, you can see that if we serve the endpoint, we are going to be getting some errors. Just a minute. You can see that I'm getting some errors saying 404 not found. So this was not the error that I want to. So once you go to the sign in page, you're not getting anything. So for this, we are going to be uh, doing some changes in our tsconfig.json file. We are going to be adding this line under our compiler option. This allows us to import all the required files. So once you add the, so after that, once you run the project, we are going to be redirected to this, and you can see that once we click our login button, we are being, you can see that we are getting all the messages that we have set in the config file, and once you click sign in, we get all the information that are needed, like address, profile ID, and signature. So this is how it's done in the mainnet. By doing this, you keep your user ID, wallet address, and everything else credentials as safe as it is in our backend service. So once you click sign out, we are going to be redirected back to the sign in page. So I'm going to be adding some more stuff to this project as we go along. So stay tuned and make sure to subscribe and take a look later.